He was hiding in a wine press, beating out wheat in secret, terrified that his enemies would find him and steal his food. He was the least important member of the weakest family in the smallest tribe in Israel. He was a coward, a doubter, a man so afraid that he tested God again and again before he would obey. And yet God looked at this trembling farmer and called him a mighty man of valor. God took an army of 32,000 and reduced it to 300. God armed them not with swords, but with trumpets, clay jars, and torches. And in a single night, this fearful man and his tiny band shattered an army that covered the valley like locusts. This is the story of Gideon, the coward who became a warrior, the doubter who became a deliverer, and the God who specializes in winning impossible victories through unlikely people, so that no one can boast except in him. Israel was in a desperate state. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. It was the familiar cycle of the book of Judges. Israel sinned. God allowed their enemies to oppress them. The people cried out. God raised up a deliverer. And then, after a period of peace, the cycle repeated. This time, the oppressors were the Midianites, a fierce, nomadic people from the eastern deserts. And their oppression was particularly brutal. The hand of Midian overpowered Israel. And because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains, and the caves, and the strongholds. The Israelites were forced to hide. They retreated to caves and mountain strongholds, abandoning their homes and farms to escape the marauders. They lived like fugitives in their own land. For whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. They would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep or ox or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents. They would come like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted, so that they laid waste the land as they came in. Like locusts. The image captures the overwhelming scale of the invasion. The Midianites came in numbers too vast to count, with camels beyond counting, stripping the land bare like a swarm of insects. Israel was reduced to poverty and starvation. And Israel was brought very low because of Midian. And the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. God heard their cry, and he prepared to send a deliverer. But the deliverer he chose was the most unlikely candidate imaginable. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Gideon was beating out wheat in a winepress. This detail tells us everything about Gideon's character at the start of the story. Threshing wheat was normally done on an open, elevated threshing floor where the wind could carry away the chaff. But Gideon was doing it in a winepress, a sunken pit designed for crushing grapes. Why? To hide. He was secretly processing his grain in a cramped, hidden space, terrified that the Midianites would discover him and steal his food. This was no warrior. This was a frightened man, hiding, working in fear, trying to salvage a little food without being caught. He was the picture of the oppressed, defeated Israel. And into this scene came the angel of the Lord with a startling greeting. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. The words must have seemed absurd. Mighty man of valor? Gideon was hiding in a wine press. There was nothing mighty or valorous about his situation. He was a coward, processing grain in secret. But God does not see as man sees. God did not call Gideon what he was. God called him what he would become. God saw not the frightened farmer, but the warrior he would make him into. God spoke to the future, not the present. This is how God often works. He calls us according to His purpose for us, not according to our current condition. He sees the potential He has placed within us, the destiny He has prepared, the person He will shape us to be. Gideon's response revealed his doubt and discouragement. And Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all His wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened?" Gideon's questions were honest. He had heard the stories of God's mighty deeds, the exodus from Egypt, the miracles of the past. But where was that God now? Why had He allowed Midian to oppress them? It seemed to Gideon that God had forsaken His people. These were the questions of a discouraged man. He could not reconcile the stories of God's power with the reality of Israel's suffering. He felt abandoned by God. By the way, if you find any of these videos interesting or enjoyable, please consider subscribing. These take a long time to make, and it really helps out. God did not rebuke Gideon's questions. Instead, He gave a commission. And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" Go in this might of yours. What might? Gideon had no might. He was hiding in a wine press. But God was telling him to go in the strength that God would provide, the strength that came from God's calling and presence. Do not I send you? The commission came with divine authority. Gideon was not going on his own initiative. God was sending him. And the one who sends provides what is needed for the mission. Gideon's response was more doubt. And he said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. How can I save Israel?" Gideon protested his inadequacy. His clan was the weakest in the tribe of Manasseh, and within that weak clan, he was the least important member of his father's house. By every measure of human standing, Gideon was at the bottom. He was the least likely person to lead a national deliverance. But this was precisely why God chose him. God delights in using the weak, the small, the insignificant, so that the glory belongs to Him alone. If a mighty warrior had delivered Israel, people might have credited the warrior. But if a coward from the weakest clan delivered Israel, everyone would know it was God's doing. And the Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. But I will be with you." This was the answer to all of Gideon's doubts. It did not matter that he was weak. It did not matter that his clan was small. It did not matter that he was the least in his family. What mattered was that God would be with him. The presence of God transforms the weakest person into an instrument of His power. Gideon, still uncertain, asked for a sign. He prepared an offering of meat and bread, and the angel of the Lord touched it with his staff. Fire sprang up and consumed the offering, and the angel vanished. Gideon realized he had seen the angel of the Lord face to face and feared for his life. But God reassured him. "Peace be to you. Do not fear. You shall not die." Gideon built an altar there and called it, "The Lord is Peace." That same night, God gave Gideon his first assignment, and it was not against the Midianites. It was against the idolatry in his own home. That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull, and the second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it." Before Gideon could fight Israel's external enemies, he had to confront the spiritual problem at home. His own father had an altar to Baal and an Asherah pole. The idolatry that had brought God's judgment was present in Gideon's own household. He had to tear it down. And Gideon obeyed, though fearfully. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. He did it by night. Even in obedience, Gideon was afraid. He tore down the altar of Baal under cover of darkness, fearing the reaction of his family and neighbors. He obeyed, but his fear was still evident. The next morning, the town discovered the destroyed altar and demanded that Gideon be put to death. But Gideon's father defended him with a striking argument. But Joash said to all who stood against him, "Will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. If Baal is truly a god, let him defend himself." The logic was undeniable. A god who cannot protect his own altar is no god at all. From this incident, Gideon received a new name, Jerubbaal, meaning, "Let Baal contend against him." Then the Midianites and their allies gathered for another invasion, crossing the Jordan and encamping in the valley of Jezreel. The crisis had come. And now the Spirit of God came upon Gideon. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. The Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. The Hebrew word suggests that the Spirit wrapped around Gideon, took possession of him, empowered him. The frightened farmer was transformed. He blew the trumpet, and men rallied to him. He sent messengers throughout the region, and a great army assembled, 32,000 men. But Gideon was still Gideon. Even now, empowered by the Spirit, leading an army, he wanted reassurance. He asked God for a sign, the famous test of the fleece.
Then Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said." Gideon placed a wool fleece on the threshing floor overnight. If the fleece was wet with dew, but the ground around it was dry, that would be his sign. The next morning, the fleece was so wet that Gideon wrung a bowl full of water from it, while the ground was dry. But Gideon was still not satisfied. He asked for a second sign, this time the reverse. Then Gideon said to God, "Let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground let there be dew." He asked God to reverse the miracle. Dry fleece, wet ground. And God graciously complied. The next morning, the fleece was dry while the ground was covered with dew. God's patience with Gideon's doubts is remarkable.
Gideon tested God repeatedly, asked for sign after sign, demanded reassurance again and again. And God, in His mercy, provided what Gideon needed. God did not abandon him for his weakness. He patiently strengthened his faith. Now Gideon was ready, or so he thought. He had his sign. He had his army of 32,000 men. He prepared to face the Midianites. But God had a surprise. The Lord said to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" Too many. The problem was not that Gideon had too few soldiers. The problem was that he had too many. If Israel won with 32,000 men, they might credit their own strength. They might boast that they had saved themselves. God would not allow that. The victory had to be so clearly impossible that everyone would know it was God's doing. So God commanded a reduction. "Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead.'" Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. The first cut was based on fear. Anyone afraid could go home, and 22,000 men left. More than 2/3 of the army departed at the first opportunity. Only 10,000 remained. Imagine Gideon watching 2/3 of his army walk away. The odds, already daunting, became overwhelming. But God was not finished. And the Lord said to Gideon, "The people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there." Still too many. Even 10,000 was too many for God's purposes. He commanded a second test at the water. So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, "Everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink." The men were tested by how they drank. Those who lapped the water like a dog were separated from those who knelt down to drink. The exact significance of the distinction is debated, but the result was clear. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men, but all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. 300. From 32,000 to 10,000 to 300. God had reduced Gideon's army by more than 99%. 300 men against an enemy that covered the valley like locusts. And the Lord said to Gideon, "With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand. Let all the others go, every man to his home." 300 men. That was God's chosen instrument. The impossibility was the point. No one could look at 300 men defeating the vast Midianite host and credit human strength. The victory would belong entirely to God. That night, knowing Gideon's tendency toward fear, God gave him one more encouragement. He told Gideon to sneak down to the Midianite camp with his servant. There, Gideon overheard a Midianite soldier telling a dream. "Behold, I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat." A barley loaf tumbling into the camp and flattening a tent? And his companion interpreted it. "This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp." Even the enemy knew. The Midianites themselves believed that God had given them into Gideon's hand. The barley loaf, A humble food of poor farmers represented the lowly Gideon.
And it would overturn the mighty camp of Midian.
When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. His faith was finally strengthened. He returned to his 300 men with confidence. "Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." Gideon armed his men in the strangest way imaginable, not with swords and spears for the initial attack, but with trumpets and empty jars with torches inside them. He divided the 300 into 3 companies and surrounded the Midianite camp under cover of darkness. "When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp, and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" The plan was pure psychology and pure faith. At the signal, all 300 men would blow their trumpets, smash their jars to reveal the blazing torches, and shout the battle cry. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. In the dead of night, 300 trumpets blasted simultaneously from all sides of the camp. 300 jars shattered. 300 torches blazed up in the darkness. And 300 voices shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" Then they stood every man in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. The effect was devastating. The Midianites, startled awake in the night, saw torches surrounding them on every side and heard trumpets blasting from all directions. In their confusion, they assumed a massive army had attacked. Panic spread through the camp. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. The Lord set every man's sword against his comrade.
In the chaos and darkness, the Midianites began attacking each other.
Unable to tell friend from enemy, they slaughtered one another. The army that covered the valley like locusts destroyed itself in panic. 300 men with trumpets and torches had defeated a vast army without drawing a sword in the initial attack. The victory was so clearly miraculous that no one could doubt its source. God had won, exactly as he intended. The Midianites fled, and Gideon called out the men of Israel to pursue them. The remnant of the army, along with reinforcements from other tribes, chased down the fleeing Midianites. They captured 2 Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb. Gideon pursued the 2 Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, across the Jordan and finally captured them, completing the victory. The deliverance was total. Midian was crushed. The oppression that had brought Israel so low was broken.
And it had all been accomplished through a frightened farmer and 300 men,
so that the glory belonged to God alone. After the victory, the men of Israel wanted to make Gideon their king. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." They offered Gideon a dynasty. They wanted him and his descendants to rule over them. It was a tempting offer, the kind of power and glory that might turn any man's head. But Gideon gave a godly response. Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Gideon recognized that the victory was God's, not his. He refused the kingship, acknowledging that God alone was Israel's true king. It was a moment of admirable humility and faith. But then Gideon made a tragic mistake. And Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." Gideon asked for the gold earrings taken from the Midianites. The people gladly gave them, and Gideon collected a great quantity of gold. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city, in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Gideon made an ephod, a priestly garment or object from the gold. Perhaps his intentions were good, a memorial of the victory or an aid to worship. But the result was disastrous. The people began to worship the ephod itself. It became an object of idolatry, a snare that led Israel back into the very sin from which Gideon had delivered them. The man who had torn down the altar of Baal, who had refused the kingship to honor God's rule, ended his life by creating an object that drew Israel into idolatry. He started well, but finished poorly. His great victory was tarnished by his later failure. After Gideon died, Israel quickly returned to Baal worship, forgetting the God who had delivered them. The cycle of sin continued. The story of Gideon teaches us powerful lessons. First, God uses weak and fearful people. Gideon was hiding in a wine press when God called him. He was the least in the weakest clan, in the smallest tribe. He was full of doubts and fears. By every human measure, he was unqualified. Yet God chose him precisely because of his weakness, so that the glory would belong to God alone. If you feel weak, inadequate, fearful, or unqualified, you are exactly the kind of person God delights to use. He does not need your strength. He needs your availability. He does not require your confidence. He requires your obedience. The power comes from Him, not from you. Second, God reduces our resources so that He gets the glory. Gideon's army was cut from 32,000 to 300. God deliberately made the odds impossible so that no one could claim human credit for the victory. When God wins, He often wins in ways that leave no doubt about who deserves the glory. We often want more resources, more strength, more help, more advantages. But God sometimes strips these away so that we will depend on Him alone, so that when victory comes, we will know it was His doing, not ours. The weakness that frustrates us may be exactly what God uses to display His power. Third, the battle belongs to the Lord. Gideon's 300 men did not win through superior tactics or overwhelming force. They blew trumpets, smashed jars, and held torches. The Lord set the enemy's swords against each other. The victory was supernatural. The weapons were symbolic. The triumph was God's. Our battles are the same. We do not win through our own power, but through dependence on God. We hold our trumpets and torches. We obey His strange commands, and we watch Him win the victory. The battle is not ours, but the Lord's. Fourth, we must be careful how we finish. Gideon started well, but ended poorly. He tore down the altar of Baal. He won a great victory. He refused the kingship to honor God. But then he made the golden ephod that became a snare to Israel. His later failure tarnished his earlier triumphs. It is not enough to begin well. We must finish well. The Christian life is not a sprint, but a marathon. Many people start with great faith and zeal, but drift into compromise, idolatry, or sin in their later years. Guard your heart, not just at the beginning, but all the way to the end. Finish the race faithfully. Finally, the story of Gideon points us to Christ. Gideon was a deliverer who saved Israel from their oppressors. Jesus is the ultimate deliverer who saves us from our greatest oppressor, sin and death. Gideon won a temporary victory that Israel soon forgot. Jesus won an eternal victory that can never be undone.
Gideon's 300 conquered through weakness, through trumpets and torches, rather than swords. Jesus conquered through weakness, through a cross rather than an army. The world expected the Messiah to come as a mighty warrior. Instead, he came as a suffering servant, defeating sin and death not through power, but through sacrifice. Just as God reduced Gideon's army so the glory would be his, so God accomplished salvation in a way that leaves no room for human boasting. We are not saved by our strength, our works, or our merit. We are saved by grace, through faith, so that no one can boast. The glory belongs entirely to God. The barley loaf that tumbled into the camp and overturned the tent represents the humble means God uses to accomplish mighty victories. Jesus came in humility, born in a manger, living in poverty, dying in shame. Yet through that humble life and sacrificial death, he overturned the kingdom of darkness and won the greatest victory in history. Perhaps you feel like Gideon at the beginning of the story, hiding, afraid, doubting, convinced that God could never use someone as weak as you. But God sees you as he saw Gideon. He calls you not what you are, but what he will make you. He calls the coward a mighty man of valor. He calls the doubter a deliverer. He calls the weak and fearful to accomplish great things through his power. The Lord is with you. That was God's answer to all of Gideon's doubts, and it is his answer to all of yours. You do not need great strength. You need his presence. You do not need confidence in yourself. You need confidence in him. Step out of your winepress. Stop hiding in fear. Take up your trumpet and your torch, and watch the God who specializes in impossible victories win the battle through your weakness. For the battle is not yours. It belongs to the Lord.